So I will talk a bit about the 5 moons, and I will go much more in depth about my aunties, Maria and Marjorie, afterward with some excerpts from a book that I've been working on for about 10 years based on interviews that I did with them. It was really, truly a privilege to spend that time with Maria all the way up until 2013 when she fell, and then she crossed over. Marjorie is doing great. Marjorie is the last of the 5 moons still living. So in the 1940s, 5 American Indian ballerinas from Oklahoma leapt off the stage and into the hearts of dance lovers around the world. Yvonne Chateau, Rosella Hightower, Muslin Larkin, and the sisters, Maria and Marjorie Tallchief, became known as the 5 Moons and have been honored in paintings, in statues, and in ballet. In 1991, Mike Larson, who is a Chickasaw artist, immortalized the dancers in this 20-foot mural. It's called Flight of Spirit, and it hangs in our state capitol rotunda in Oklahoma City. It is gorgeous. The dancers united in 1967 for the second Oklahoma Ballerina Festival to perform the 4 Moons, which was based on music by Lewis Ballard, who was a Cherokee Quapaw composer. Maria had retired from dance by then, and so she chose not to perform. That's why there's only 4 moons in that particular ballet. And so one of the last paintings that Jerome Tiger, who was a Muskogee Creek artist, did was for this 4 Moons ballet performance. And so this was the cover of the program. And the Oklahoma Historical Society commissioned the ballet as well as the painting. And this painting hangs in the Gilcrease Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma now. The 5 Moons became the title of a set of bronze sculptures by Monty England and Gary Henson that were installed on the lawn of the Tulsa Historical Society. So that's where we are introduced to the 5 Moons as opposed to the 4 Moons. And so when these dancers began their careers, Europeans really dominated ballet, but these women, due to their talent, dedication, and determination, went to the top of their field and brought recognition to Oklahoma, as well as Native American artistry. Each sculpture depicts the ballerinas in the ballet that she considered to be her signature piece. Now, Muslin Larkin was amazing. She was a fireball, I'll tell you, a tiny fireball. She was born on January 14th, 1925 in Miami, Oklahoma. She's the daughter of Ava Matlagova, who was a Russian dancer, and she toured the United States quite frequently. Her father was Reuben Larkin, who was part Welsh and part Shawnee Peoria Indian. At 15, she became a member of the original Ballet Russe. The company changed her name to Muslin Larkin. That time, American ballet dancers did that pretty often. Beginning in the 1940s, Muslin performed with several Ballet Russe companies, and her roles ranged from the lyrical waltz and Michael Fokines' Sylphides to the boisterous cowgirl in Agnes DeMille's Rodeo. She is tiny and sparkling with a magnificent jump and a spectacular way with turns, the British critic P.W. Manchester wrote of her in 1955. While touring Latin America with de Bazille's company, also known as the original Ballet Russe during World War II, Muslin fell in love with Roman Jasinski, a very handsome Polish principal dancer, and they were married in Buenos Aires. She was only 19. After their son Reuben was born, the family moved to Tulsa in 1954. Wishing to put down roots and raise their son, Larkin and Jasinski exchanged their globe-trotting days for the equally hectic enterprise of establishing their own ballet school. Formerly called the Tulsa Civic Ballet, their company initially performed to benefit underprivileged children that were in need of dental care. Within the Tulsa community, Jasinski and Larkin established numerous programs to benefit the underprivileged and those budding talents which might have otherwise been passed over due to lack of opportunity. Jasinski founded a rare dance class for boys and only taught at the University of Tulsa for a short period of time, but he established a scholarship program for boys there. Some of you may know boys are hard to find in ballet. So the couple also taught dance and related arts to low-income Indian families with alcohol and drug problems. In 1956, they founded the Tulsa Ballet, visited the Tulsa public schools regularly, stimulating an understanding and appreciation of dance. Larkin was inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame in 1978 and received the Dance Magazine Award in 1988 and was named Outstanding Indian by the Council of American Indians. Yvonne Chateau was born in Fort Worth in 1929. She's part French and Shawnee Cherokee. Shawnee on the Cherokee rolls, which was very common because the Dawes rolls were a mess. So she was, her last name was Chateau, and she liked to joke that if you reversed the syllables in her surname, Chateau, it became Toshu. She trained in Oklahoma in the School of American Ballet in New York City at 14. She was accepted into the Ballerina de Monte Carlo, becoming the company's youngest dancer at the time. She performed her first solo role in 1945 on her 16th birthday, and she danced the prayer variation of Coppelia. The critic Edwin Denby described her performance as lovely in every way. The British critic P.W. Manchester wrote, although she is tall and strongly built, she is very light and brings an ecstatic quality to her dancing. Chateau said of herself, "I was not a bravura-style technician who could whip off 32 fouettes without blinking an eye. I wasn't a classical ballerina in the purest sense. I preferred roles that I could put my heart and soul into, roles that were technically challenging but demanded more than executing steps. Every dancer has an individual forte, and mine was being able to create an illusion and express a mood." Am I going the right way? On stage. Her repertoire included Raymonda, Paquita, The Nutcracker, and Swan Lake. After having been singled out early in her career by the choreographer and dancer Leonid Messine, then at the height of his fame, she considered herself to be a Messine dancer and danced to considerable acclaim in many of his works. Chateau fell in love with fellow dancer Miguel Tarakoff, and they married in 1956. In 1957, the Ballerina de Monte Carlo gave a season at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York, and by this time, Chateau was already 6 months pregnant with her first child. But since, she says, I had no problems and I showed very little, I went ahead and danced. Following a period dancing in Miguel's home, and he's from Uruguay, and the birth of their second daughter, the couple returned to Oklahoma, where they set up the School of Dance at the University of Oklahoma, which is the first fully accredited university dance program in the country. They later opened a private dance studio in Oklahoma City and also founded the Oklahoma City Ballet, which is the precursor of today's Oklahoma City Ballet. My wife teaches there. She was inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame when she was 18, the youngest person ever to be given such an honor. Rosella Hightower was Choctaw, born in Durwood, Oklahoma in 1920, the only child of Edgar and Eula Mae Flanning Hightower. She was 5 when her father got a job in Missouri, the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railway, and they moved to Kansas City. At 13, she began training with Dorothy Perkins, who was a local teacher there, and when she auditioned for the Ballet Russe, Hightower was horrified to discover during those Depression years that she was one of 200 auditioning for 60 spots. The arrival of more Russian dancers made what she thought was a contract opportunity seem even more remote. She stayed after class, though, and in an arduous pursuit of perfection, she learned the troupe's repertoire on her own time, and so consequently, she was hired by the Ballerina de Monte Carlo. In 1938, Hightower began her professional career. She performed with most of ballet's celebrated partners, Eric Brun, Andrei Aglevsky, and had partnered with Rudolf Nureyev in Swan Lakes, Pas de Deux in 1961, marking one of his first stage appearances after defecting to the West. She performed with several companies, including the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, Ballet Theatre, Original Ballet Russe, Grand Ballet Marquis de Quebec, the American Ballet Theatre, and others. In 1962, she founded the Center for Classical Dance, a school in Cannes, France, modeled after her own ideas of multidisciplinary training. She was appointed director of the Marseille Opera Ballet and then of the Ballet de Nancy. In 1981, she became the first American director of the Ballet of the Paris Opera. New York Times critic John Martin raved about her debut at the Met as Mirtha in Giselle, a role she had to learn in 5 hours after prima ballerina Alicia Markova fell sick in 1947. During her career, she performed throughout the world and is generally considered an aristocrat of ballet dancing. Hightower was married briefly to a ballet dancer, Misha Reznikov, in 1938, and then she later married French designer and artist Jean Roubier in Paris in 1952. Their only child, Dominique Roubier, was born in 1955 in Kansas City, and she lived in France for the remainder of her life. So my auntie, Maria, was actually born Elizabeth Marie, and she was known as Betty Marie even up until she started her professional career. And she was born in 1925 in Fairfax. In 1947, she became the first American to dance with the Paris Opera Ballet. And after marrying choreographer George Balanchine, who created her signature Firebird role, among others, she became prima ballerina of the New York City Ballet. One of the best-known roles was, of course, the Sugar Plum Fairy in The Nutcracker. She performed with the Bolshoi in Moscow in 1960, making her the first American ever to do so. After retiring from dancing, she and her sister Marjorie opened the Chicago City Ballet, a ballet school and dance company. This is a beautiful picture of her with George Balanchine in the studio in 47, I believe it was. Growing up, the young Betty Marie attended Catholic school just down the hill from her house in Fairfax. Her grandmother Tallchief's house was located directly across the street. She admired the nuns and one time even considered being a nun. The nuns loved the arts, she said. They loved that I danced and that I played the piano. Maria's Scots-Irish mother, Ruth, was a very determined woman, and she would not allow Maria to grow idle at all. She was concerned because so many Osage kids were turning to drugs and alcohol that Maria and Marjorie might fall into that trap. And so she kept them in the dance studio or rehearsing the piano pretty much all the time. Maria said that I had to get straight A's in school and then ballet every evening at 5 o'clock. So she learned her musical training. She had perfect pitch. She had an innate sense of rhythm, which she attributes to attending our dances in Fairfax. She said, when I first started dancing ballet, reporters used to come up to me and say that only Russians like George Balanchine should be doing classical ballet. I would tell them that when American Indian people hear music, they want to dance. We were born to dance. Maria's grandmother Tallchief made sure that the girls attended the Osage dances, and Maria was also had a half-brother from her father's first marriage. Now, they had a brother named Jerry, and a lot of people don't know that. Jerry had a debilitating disease, and he was born with rickets, and then he got kicked in the head by a horse. And so they had to send him to boarding school, and so he left their lives very young and was never a part of their lives ever again. It was very sad. When Maria was 5, she began taking dance lessons from an itinerant ballet teacher from Tulsa known as Mrs. Sabine. So Maria doesn't remember her fondly since she had him on point when they were 3. And so, But she did choreograph some fun pieces that Maria and Marjorie performed in Fairfax in the Tallchief Theater, which is still there. This is a picture of Maria and George Balanchine. So after they got married, she brought George to Fairfax, and he loved it. He said it reminded him of home. So this is George with a pig, and he loved animals. He loved cats. He was such a shy guy, Maria said. He was very, very quiet and introspective. And while he was there, our aunt gave him a bracelet, a silver and turquoise bracelet, and he wore it every single day of his life. Even when Maria and her later, when she married Buzz Passion, when they visited George in the hospital right before he was about to pass away, he still had that bracelet on. And when they walked in, Maria said George was in bed and he was doing this. And Maria said, "George, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm making steps." So he was choreographing all the way up until the end. How am I doing on time? I'll move forward to Marjorie because I think we're at about 16 minutes, is that right? Okay. Here's the Tallchief Theater in Fairfax. It got a little damage recently in a tornado, but it's still there and we're working on it. We're renovating it. A gorgeous picture of Maria and George. Lovely. What ballet is this? Swan Lake. Yep. Rehearsals. So, let me explain. I was told that George would throw his cat in the air when he was trying to learn about like just the physical space and like movement in the air, and he would literally just throw the cat up and see what the cat did, and then he would create jumps out of that. Isn't it funny? Gorgeous, right? Firebird, of course. I love this backstage photo of Firebird. And then after the show. Isn't she beautiful? This is Eric Brune. She loved dancing with Eric, and she introduced Rudolf Nureyev to Eric Brune, and became, Eric was Rudolph's first male companion. And then she later married Buzz Passion, who was a Chicago businessman. And they were married for more than 40 years, had a daughter named Elise, and she's a poet. She teaches at the Art Institute of Chicago, an amazing poet. Maria was a really great piano player. I mean, she was going to be a concert pianist, and she had to make a choice when she got to be about 17. That's when she started really focusing exclusively on ballet. And then she and her sister danced. They didn't actually dance together on a stage, but their paths crossed all the time throughout their professional careers. I'm going to move on down to Marjorie. I wish I could share more, because there's really so much that I could share, but I guess you'll just have to wait until the book comes out. So, by the way, has anyone read Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann? Yeah? Mm-hmm. So this is about a very dark period in our tribal history, and it was called the Reign of Terror, and after oil was discovered on the Osage Reservation, a lot of Osages were systematically murdered for their oil rights, one of which was my great-grandfather, Russ Tallchief. And so Maria and Marjorie were born right in the middle of that Reign of Terror in 1925 and 7. And so moving to California was also part of that decision, was just based on how dangerous it was in Osage County at that time. So Marjorie served as the director of dance for the Civic Ballet Academy in Dallas, Texas, and then she also was at the City Ballet in Chicago with Maria. In 1989, she accepted the position of director of the dance for Herod Conservatory in Boca Raton, Florida, where she remained until her retirement in 1993, but she still lives there, Delray Beach specifically. Her repertoire included classical and contemporary dance roles that exhibited her talents as one of the most versatile ballet dancers of the 20th century. During her career, she performed throughout North America and Europe. She danced for many heads of state, including John F. Kennedy, Charles de Gaulle, Lyndon Johnson. She remembers very well growing up in Fairfax. She has great memories, even though they left when they were pretty young. She went to Catholic school down the road with Maria. And so she began dancing when she was about 2 as well. And she feels like, she told me that she thinks she started dancing too young. And she said there's a picture of me somewhere when she was 5 or 6, and she was on point in that picture. There was a dancer named Mrs. Sable, an itinerant ballet dancer that just traveled around to rural areas and taught ballet. So it was, at least they got some training early on, but not very good training. So she married George Sabine. He was just an amazing guy. He spoke 7 languages. He was in World War II. He was a spy in World War II, and he and Marjorie met after he got out of the Army, and he became an American citizen. He was a very poetic guy. His sons really admired his passion. A very different dancer from George Balanchine. Balanchine was very technical, and George Sabine was very lyrical and very poetic. They had twins. So when Marjorie and George were at the Paris Opera, they were at the Paris Opera for 14 years, and he was the artistic director. She was an étoile, the first American étoile in the Paris Opera. And they worked for France, and so they had a 9-to-5 gig. Can you imagine, like, in the world of dance? They commuted into Paris together from 9 to 5. Had nice long lunches, too, as they do in Paris, right? And so they were able to have a family and, have a balanced life. Maria never had that. And as you know, it's hard to do that in dance. I never see my wife. She's at the ballet, I'm telling you, 7 days a week. Isn't that amazing? So this was when they were getting ready for this show at the Marais, and I'll tell you this one last story. So they were in Paris. There's an area called the Marais. It's kind of a bohemian area. And they were dancing with Harkness, and they were collaborating with Alvin Ailey. And Ruth, Marjorie's mom, Ruth, this is in the 60s, and she was a little bit uncomfortable with that because she didn't understand, that, hey, there are black dancers out there. So, let's get together. There's a narrative, there's a dialogue between American Indian and African American dance and movement, and let's just see what happens. And so they were performing, and it was an outdoor performance, and it started to rain. So one by one, the musicians stopped playing, and then one by one, the dancers stopped dancing and ran off the stage, except for Marjorie, and she never stopped dancing. Someone had to come out and stop her, and then take her off stage. So why don't I just leave it at that? I think it's about time, and I'd be happy to take any questions later, or I'll be here all day. So thank you very much.